Right here we have a flat door foundation. You can see is not in terrific condition over here and here, so we've made some foundation plates. We're going to hide everything that doesn't look nice. On a flat door, the most difficult part to get to fit properly is usually down here at the threshold, because you'll see you've got some uneven things. Sometimes it works out, but not always. In this particular case, we did a plate that it's a filler strip that'll go underneath it. I'm going to take the old door off, grind the iron hinges off, clean up the wall, wire brush, and then we'll be ready for our install. Now at this point in time, there's just some prep work. So obviously these hinges are in the way. So I'm going to grind that off. You want to wear a mask. A lot of times they were set in lead. The leveler you do it, the better the door goes in. Just a thought on grinding hot embers. Just make sure you're not shooting them into something that wants to catch fire. The detail work here, the little extra time you spend leveling things out, easier it is to put on. I ground off a couple of high places here and here. I also went in there a touch just because I wanted to get rid of the moss. What I'll do now is I'm going to dry it off, wire brush it, because you're going to want the caulk to stick. Alright, so I've pretty much cleaned and dried the wall. Caulk will not stick to anything that's damp. It won't stick to anything that's loose. Spent a little extra time down here and down here. I wanted to get down to the bare masonry so that when we caulked it, it would adhere better. The reason I'm not worrying about the paint in a lot of the places is the whole thing's going to be covered. So I worried about where I'm going to caulk it. You'll see as we put the door together that this gets a foundation plate to cover this irregularity. This whole thing will be covered, and then this whole thing gets covered. So the only parts for me to caulk are going to be down here. So I ground that, wire brush that, / ground that, and then I'm going to do a little more up here, but you'll also see I cut a groove underneath here, and that groove is so that I'm putting caulk right to masonry and not to paint. You're breeding longevity by doing that. So the concept of a foundation plate is to cap things that are problems, to go over top of some kind of a field stone wall, anything that's irregular and would be difficult to caulk to. The last reason for a foundation plate is you like the look. It gives it a really finished button down look when it's all done. Voila, you've hidden everything that's ugly. So because of this irregularity here, we're capping this piece. You'll see that once we put the frame on there, it gives it a beautiful look. I'm also going to put the other piece in now. I'm not sure if I'm going to need to pull it out or move it around, but as a concept, I'll show you why. It just makes the installation so much easier. There's a couple of different intersections on a flat door. Sometimes everything slopes down so that this is all flat, level, and on the same plane. Easiest thing you can do. Sometimes this comes down and stops right here. When you put the threshold on there, it's hanging in the air. We can take a piece of material and make it come up the inside of the wall and kick in that way. So you actually, it shortens the step by about 1.5 inches, but it actually gives you the support that you need to rest the threshold on at the base. And again, the most difficult part of this door always to get to fit is that. This one doesn't have it. Well, it does, but I'm not going to use it. It's a lintel extension, and at the end, I'll show you how and why. And this is the piece. And again, I'll probably have to move it. Fills up that gap. When you put the threshold on there, it's firm as the day is long, so you get no give to it. Anytime you have give over time, what that does is it shortens the life of the product, because you're bouncing. It's like taking a piece of metal and bending it back and forth. Eventually the inserts give way or something happens. All right, so it actually fits pretty well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to attach it. This is a single leaf door. So it's got one door, and this one opens up off to the left-hand side. The reason that it's that way is because that was what the homeowner had, and that's what he wanted. We don't pre-drill the holes because if you happen to have a crack where I pre-drilled a hole, it doesn't help you. So we allow you to select where the holes go so that you can select the best concrete to anchor it into. Makes a little bit of noise, but we just use a newer 1/4-inch drill bit and just go right through everything at one time. So at this point in time, I'm going to mark where I'm going to make the hole here. You want them to match, you want them to look decent on both sides. What we're going to do is we're going to make them all 14 inches apart. We basically want them evenly spaced so it looks aesthetically pleasing. So the foundation plate stops there, the door stops here, so we're going to put something kind of in the middle of the two. It's not all that important. I'm going to put one on the bottom of there just to anchor it in place. I'm going to put the insert in. I'm actually not going to nail it all the way down because these things vibrate a lot. If I put the insert in and hammer it in, the vibration will actually vibrate it loose. But I'm going to stabilize that corner, and then we're going to start playing on this side. What we do here is we use, it's called a Zamax, a lead insert with a nail drive. So we use a 1/4-inch bit, put this down all the way in, and then we'll hammer it down. You can use on a flash door if the foundation's not in great shape. Sometimes it behooves you to use the tap cons because there's a little less vibration. It's a little easier on the top of the wall. I'm going to stabilize that corner, get that corner, make sure we're square, and then I'll do the rest of the holes. So this is almost like laminated 80 something. There's a little flex in it, but we're going to join the two together, and then we'll put a shim on the inside and it all disappears. This happens to be a little too long for this thing, so what I'm going to do is I've now threaded it. I'm just going to actually take a grinding wheel and cut off a little bit. So once it goes through and it threads through this piece here, that'll be your vertical stabilizer. Yep, perfect. What I'm going to do now is knock this down. So some people are concerned with water getting down in these holes. I use a clear, and we'll talk about it a little later. It's a GeoCell tripolymer. Just go like that, put them in. It is paintable. You hear how solid those are, and again, that's one of the reasons we don't do the holes in advance, because if your foundation is not in great shape, if you already have a pre-drilled hole, you can't put it where your foundation is nice. Putting the handle on right now. I put a little dab of caulk there, especially if you're installing this for somebody else. You might get a little water that drips in there, and nobody wants to go back for something silly like that. Now you don't get any callbacks. So that is GeoCell. You've seen it on the other video. Tripolymer. We like it. Expands and contracts with different materials. This is kind of going to move around together, although the polyurethane has a tendency to tear. Also, I'm going to do this up top. You're going to find out it's also water clear for things where you have larger gaps to fill and you don't want it to look unsightly. I mean, it literally is water clear. So that's actually a wonderful seal. It's kind of a little blobby. If you put it on with a color, it probably wouldn't look as nice. I'm going to actually caulk underneath it. So what happens is people go, I see light, and they think there's a problem. So I'm going to caulk it underneath with caulk, which is 3300, because you can't see through it. I'm going to close the door, and when I look around and I see light, I'm going to hide that light from the inside. I'm not hiding a leak or anything like that. I'm hiding the potential for the customer to look at it and say, I see daylight, you didn't caulk. Had to go back enough times to know that it's worth doing. Tools that you need are going to be a grinder, a hammer drill, a caulk gun, and things that are very convenient to have. So you're going to want to clean and dry your substrate so that the caulk sticks. So it's a wire brush with a torch. You can sweep stuff till the cows come home, but a nice strong vacuum is great. I don't know, that's about it. Thank you very much. We use a teardrop style hinge. The reason we do that is the strongest, it's the best. The drawback to it is when you close the door, the hinge recesses under the side rail, as you see right there. One of two things has to happen. When we make the door, when you give us the inside dimension of the width, we'll take 5 inches, 2.5 inches on either side, if it's a double door, off the inside width of the thing, so that when you close the door, you can see these didn't hit anything. If you don't want to narrow the opening, what you can do is you can actually take a 4.5 inch angle grinder with a 7.25 inch masonry wheel and cut into the wall and just make a series of slices and then break it off. Bury it into the arbor, you bring it down. That's the perfect depth for it. And a lot of people don't want to narrow the opening, and they look at this up here and they go, oh, it's narrower. The reality of it is you're not getting anything into your basement that you're not getting through the door at the bottom of the jambs. The determining factor would be the door that's at the bottom, the vertical man door. As long as that's as wide as the opening is, you're not limiting yourself in any way. The lintel extension is almost like a shingle, and it's supposed to take over whatever space is left up top. The most important thing to do is to get that to seat the best that it can, and then the lintel extension will allow you to deal with any sort of hole that was left up top.